Much, and thank you for inviting me. As luck would have it, we are back up and running just in time. So thank you for shuffling me to the end. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for the PowerPoint here. Let me start the PowerPoint first, the slideshow part. Okay. So this is a, oops. I lost my Zoom window for a second here. Let me go ahead and hit share screen. Oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Really? Let's see what I.
You may need to click on those three little dots on the right of my window and say make co-host.
Oh, okay. Let me see where you are over here. Wait a minute. This always happens this way. Oh, okay. How about that? How about now?
Yes, this is working now.
Okay.
Right. And all right, can you all see my screen now?
There we go. Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, this is how to get started with HamPi. HamPi is a software distribution that I've created for the Raspberry Pi computers that is for basically, it's ham radio use on the Raspberry Pi. And let me see here. I'm actually, there we go. So yeah, it's for the Raspberry Pi, but what is a Raspberry Pi? It's basically a system on a chip attached to a board that runs anywhere from $30 up to $75, and it can run a full operating system. Typically what's run on it is Linux, but there are other operating systems, including Windows IoT Core, and some people have even gotten Windows 10 ARM to run on it. It's actually a pretty beefy computer in terms of RAM. It goes anywhere from 2 gigabytes for like a $30 version, all the way up to 8 gigabytes for the $75 version of the board. It's got two USB 2.0 ports on the, when you're looking at the ports, those are on the left side. And then in the center, you have two USB 3.0 fast ports in the center. It has gigabit Ethernet on the far right side. It includes it supports both 2 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, so it's 802.11ac compliant. It also supports Bluetooth 5.0 and the Bluetooth Low Energy, the BLE. It comes with a micro SD card slot, and that's where you typically store your operating system and your programs and your data files. Although with the Raspberry Pi 4, you can actually boot up off of USB, so you can actually store your operating system on a fast SSD drive like I do, typically. It has one audio jack, which is audio out. It has a port for a camera, and it's got like a 40 pin or so GPIO header that sticks out on the board. So a lot of people use it for all sorts of different purposes, gathering temperature, running robots. Pretty much the sky's the limit. It's a really cheap way to get into programming or do things like ham radio, or it even will function as a full desktop, although support for certain applications that you may need on a day-to-day basis are somewhat limited. And of course, I talked about the Raspberry Pi supporting multiple operating systems, and I mentioned Windows 10 IoT Core. You can run Ubuntu or Ubuntu Mate on it. Another operating system called OSMC. I've never tried Mozilla Web Things, PiNet, RISC-OS, or the Weather Station, but I am aware those exist. And of course, some people have referred to HamPi as HamPi OS. I don't think that's quite that, but it definitely is a software distribution. What can you do with the Pi? Well, pretty much anything you can do with a desktop computer. You have a LibreOffice suite, so you can do word processing, run with a spreadsheet, or present like a PowerPoint presentation like I'm doing right now. You can run it as a media player. A lot of people have them in the living room, in their living rooms, and basically tape these Pis to the side of their television. There is a lot of game emulators for the Pi. In fact, That's another software distribution, and I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But I mean, robotics, you can run, people have gotten Windows 3 programming on it. I've mentioned also Windows 10. You can learn to program on it. It comes with Python and a couple of Python specific IDEs. Now that you have USB 3 ports on it and an internal PCI bus on it, people are starting to use these as network file servers. Of course, there's home automation, hooking up your printers wirelessly, streaming music, and of course, being cheap, they're perfect for a kid's first computer. And in the case of a computing cluster, I actually have one, and I'll show that to you later if you remind me, because I might forget. I have some electronics hardware here to make my Pi into a weather station. I just haven't hooked it up yet and done the programming. And of course, the ham radio station. The Raspberry Pi 4 has special power requirements over the Raspberry Pi 3. It requires an input voltage of between 4.0 and 5.5 volts, and you cannot exceed 6 volts or you will damage the board. The typical power range is 4.7 volts to 5.25 volts. So what's special about this is that this runs off of a USB-C power supply that supplies 3 amps or 15 watts. The Raspberry Pi 3 and before ran on a 2 amp power supply. And this has now been fixed, but the original Pi 4 had a USB-C power port that was not quite wired to specifications, and they fixed that in recent versions. So when you go to the store or order them online, you're going to be more than likely getting the fixed version. So why would we want to actually use the Raspberry Pi in the Ham Shack? Well, due to its small size and its lightweight, it's perfect for going portable. It also fits very well on the desktop, where you can, like I said earlier, you could tape it to the side of the monitor and plug it in, and you don't even need desk space for it. So the power needs are also very low. Typically, like the laptop I'm using for this presentation takes an 80-watt power supply, but the Pi's running on 15 watts or less. And finally, it uses a free operating system. It uses a variations of Linux, which is very well supported by both the ham radio and just general computer community at large. So, you know, if you haven't worked with a Raspberry Pi before, or if you haven't worked with HamPi before, you know, you might be wondering where you want to start. Well, when you determine what your actual needs are, then it'll determine the equipment. You know, the Raspberry Pi, what kind of power supply you're going to have, whether you've got like a wall wart or you're plugged into a USB power brick, or, you know, whether you're running off an SD card or an SSD drive. So there's all sorts of different things you could do, configure this. In my particular case, I'm reusing a USB keyboard, mouse, and display for occasional use, although mostly I just connect remotely into the Pi and just use my laptop to connect to it. Let me see, the Pi 4 also has a micro HDMI versus the earlier Pis, which have used full-size HDMI cables. So have to be aware of that for the Pi 4. And then finally, you want to download something like HamPi. I have version 1.0 mentioned here. We're actually at version 1.2 alpha right now. That was the December 2020 release. And you can either download it from radiowaves.ca or from sourceforge.net. And to flash the image, you want to use something like Balena Etcher, which is very well supported for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And then once you flashed a card, you put the Pi all together. You put the card in, you plug in the USB keyboard and mouse and power supply and display, and you're pretty much set to go. The only thing you have left at that point is how you're hooking up your radio. So the the HamPi image version 1.2a is a custom built, and it's when I say custom, it's built using an automated system. So I don't even do anything. I don't do anything in terms of installing it. It's an automatic installer that took me 6 months to write, and it installs about 90 applications to the Raspberry Pi. The software automation tool is called Ansible, and what's nice about it is once you write Ansible once, and then you can rerun it over and over and over again. So typically, what I have is a quarterly release cycle for HamPi. And so the March release will be version 1.3, and then the June release after that will be 1.4. I typically try to keep things fresh by adding new applications to it, and I have about 10 applications that are ham radio related that I want to add for 1.3. I may not add that many, but they're on the to-do list. So some of the software apps you've got are the FL Digi Suite. Like FL Reg, FL Digi, FL Message. You've got WSJTX, Joe Taylor's weak signal program, JS8 Call, which is the FT8 made by a local developer right here in Atlanta that uses the FT8 protocol to actually have conversational messages. Things like Cubic SDR, the list pretty much just goes on and on. You've got all sorts of things that are APRS related, CW related, ham testing related, satellite related, and support for SDR hardware. So all sorts of goodies are included. Even things for the people that are tracking the airplanes. The Atlanta Radio Club. You're close to Hartsville, right here in Gwinnett. I'm close to the Gwinnett airport, and so it's all, yeah. And you're able to follow airplanes that are flying around by listening to their radio transponders. So pretty much the sky's the limit. Whatever people have written software for. So where do we find the HamPi software image 1.2 alpha? I would advise the easiest place to go to is SourceForge, sourceforge.net/project/HamPi. And the software image is the full size, but the full size when you extract it is about 15 gigabytes, but the compressed version is actually about 3.5 gigabytes that you have to download. The first 60 days of HamPi was available. There were over 6,000 direct downloads. And to date, there's been well over 25,000 direct downloads. So a lot of people are running HamPi, or at least a lot of people have downloaded it. So where does one get support for HamPi? I run a community support group on groups.io called ham-pi. There's also an excellent wiki on GitHub, and you go to github.com/dslaughter/hampi/wiki, and it talks about all the different applications on there. There's also a QRZ thread that's not the best, but it is another place to go find support. And finally, you're always welcome to attend a GARS workshop. So go to gars.org and join us right now on Zoom. But after this pandemic has passed us, definitely join us at the Gwinnett Airport, we're at the EAA hangar 690. So how do we get the HamPi software image on a micro SD card? Some people actually just try to copy the image as a file to card, but that doesn't work because it's not a file. It's actually a file system. So if you have a Windows PC, you want to use Balena Etcher. There are other programs available, but Balena Etcher is really the simplest to go. It's a very simple, organized program, and it's cross-platform. It runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. But for people that are a little technical, and they're already running Linux, you can use DD to flash the card. And any way you want to do it, it works, just as long as you're copying it as an image and not as a file.
Fast question is the procedure for doing this documented. There are probably people, including me, who are unfamiliar with Balena Etcher, and are there instructions for using that anywhere, on your site, to say,
yes,
here's how to download it, here's what to do on the PC to create the image?
Yes, and on SourceForge, it's not just the image file to download. I've got instructions literally called how to flash image. So, so I've got some basic instructions on how to flash it. I've got some instructions on how to upgrade. So if you've done all your configuring of FL-Digi and WSGTX and you don't want to reconfigure those when you get an update to HamPi, it shows you how to back up your configurations and then restore them on the new system. So yeah, this is a very mature product, and I'm not sure I want to call it a product because it's not for sale. This is freely available, but it's a very mature software suite. I've been doing this now for over a year. Any other questions? Okay, I'll keep going. The initial username and password is important, and I've left it to the default for Raspberry Pi OS, which is username Pi and password Raspberry. That's the same default username and password that Raspberry Pi OS or Raspbian uses. But the obvious security thing I need to mention is please do change it to something unique, especially if you put your Raspberry Pi on the internet. I put my Pi on the internet, and I'm using something called SSH, and I'm using a different port. I'm requiring keys, and I don't even actually use the password to log in. I actually use keys to log in. So I've done a lot to protect myself, but at least the minimum, change the password for the Pi user account when you start up HamPi. How do you change the password? The simple answer is to open up a terminal window or a command line or a shell and run the PASSWD command. And it will ask you for your current password, which is Raspberry, and then it asks you for the new password and makes you verify it twice. Somebody asked if you can change the username Pi. That's actually a really bad idea. According to Kyle, W3DJS and GARS, the operating system will actually sense that the Pi user has been deleted. It will recreate it and give it the default password. So if you change the username Pi to like Dave and then put the device on the internet, it will recreate the Pi account with the default password, and you've just created yourself a big security breach. So you can't change the existing username Pi, but what you can do is add a new user to the system using the sudo add user command. So, and that the slide goes into details on that. The image that I ship is compressed 3.5 gigabytes, but it decompresses to a 15 gigabyte image when it gets written out. When you copy that to a 32 gigabyte or larger SD card, it doesn't initially sense how big the card is. So what you need to do is run sudo raspi-config and select #1 expand file system, and that will let you use the entire SD card so that so that you haven't paid for space you're not using. And yeah, the default size of 15 gigabytes barely fits everything, so you definitely want to expand it. Okay, so yeah, we're probably wondering, how do we connect the Pi to the radio? I have an ICOM IC7300, and my solution is going to be different than other people's. In my case, the ICOM 7300 runs cat control over USB, and it provides a USB sound card over USB. So I plug a shielded USB cable from the 7300 to the Raspberry Pi. And it's really important to use a shielded cable, because even if you've got your antenna far away, some RF seems to always creep into the shack on the USB cable, and you could be trying to transmit on like 80 meter, for example, and you might be good at 25 watts, but if you increase it to 50 watts, the transmit command will actually cause the device to shut off. So in my case, I added ferrite chokes, and that worked as a stopgap measure. But what I did later was just go ahead and get a shielded cable, and that's a permanent long-term solution. Now, if you have a radio that doesn't have a built-in cat control or a sound card on USB, well, what you can do is go ahead and use something like a SignalLink or a Sabrent USB sound adapter to connect to the Pi. Or and I'm not paid. I'm not paid to do this, although I am a customer of Northwest Digital Radio. They have a Draws ham radio hat, which plugs into the top of the Pi, and it runs for about $150. And they've now just started shipping the metal cases, the metal aluminum enclosures that will wrap around the Raspberry Pi 3 and the Draws hat. So I have not used the Draws with a 4. It probably should work, but I haven't bothered with it because the 4 runs a little hot, and I like to run fans on top of it and keep things cool. So people, especially in the field, are wondering, well, how do we keep accurate time of the Pi? When you're in the ham shack, you may have an internet connection and you can synchronize time over the internet, and that just works great. But when you're in the field, you're going to probably want to use either a GPS receiver, and we've got a picture of a very inexpensive one that runs about $8 on Amazon, or an RTC module, which is the picture above that with the battery. That runs for about $15. Or actually, I've gotten them cheaper than $15 on Amazon. I think I've gotten them for about 3 for $9 or something like that. Alternatively, the Draws hat I mentioned before has a built-in GPS receiver. So that's $150, but you're not just getting the GPS receiver, you're getting the serial ports and built-in RTC and all these other features on which I can't remember at this moment. So how do we power the Raspberry Pi? Well, in the ham shack, we're just going to use a regular old wall wart, and it's got the USB-C connector on the end, and it's pumping 3 amps of 5-volt power into the Pi. In the ham shack, you could use power over Ethernet, which requires special Ethernet hubs. That's power on the cable. You can also push power in through the GPIO pins, number 2 and for 5-volt, and ground for pin number 6. But unless you know what you're doing, probably shouldn't power through the GPIO ports. There are some other solutions. I've used the USB battery pack. That works pretty well. And there's also something called MoPi 2, which is a hot swap mobile power. There's solar panels. There's all sorts of other things on the internet that I haven't even listed. That changes from day to day. So with HamPi, okay, we've got a use case here, operating digital modes. If you want to do digital communications using HamPi, as I mentioned earlier, there's the FL Digi Suite by W3DJS, and the Dave W3DJS modifies the FL Digi Suite on a very regular basis. So as of HamPi 1.2, I've included a script that will let you update the FL Digi Suite from the internet, and it will pick up the latest released versions, the released versions, not the alphas, and it will update what's local on the HamPi without you having to wait for an update that may be 3 months away. And the same deal for WSJTX. HamPi ships with the version that was available when it was built in December, but Joe Taylor has finalized version 2.3 of WSJTX, and there's a script on there that allows you to update to the latest version, so you don't have to wait for the March update. Grid Tracker is a wonderful program that works with WSJTX that shows you grid squares that you've worked, and it does all sorts of mapping for your worked grid squares. An alternative client to WSJTX is JTDX, and then KN4CRD, who's right here in the Atlanta area. He wrote JS8 call, and it's a messaging system built on top of the FT8 protocol. So, and then of course there's JS8 call tools, which is an add-on utility. We've got other stuff like the GLONASS satellite system software-defined receiver. We've got some lesser known programs like LinPSK, Multimon NG, PSK31, and TWPSK. Now, Multimon, I think, actually does a little bit of APRS work. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think that's APRS related. Any questions so far? Okay, keep going. So another HamPi use case, logging. And this list is going to get a little bit longer in version 1.3 of HamPi, but right now we've got Trusted QSL, which is the logbook of the world client from ARRL, and it works very well. It's got a very well known Linux program called CQR log, which is kind of the, it kind of has everything but the kitchen sink in it. And then we have some lightweight programs like PyQso, Klog, TLF, TuckNack2, TWlog, and Xlog. Now, there's one thing on the list here that I actually wrote. It's called WSJTX 2 N3FJP. What it is that WSJTX does not log to N3FJP. So this is a logging adapter that I wrote. So it listens to WSJTX when you log a QSO. It takes that and it will reformat into a form that N3FJP understands and can put into its system. So I actually used that for last field day and it ran perfectly. I did, I think about 360 QSOs using FT8 and FT4, and it ran perfectly for both FT8 and FT4. So I was very happy about that.
Oh, there it is. It didn't cut off. I thought it cut off.
So we also have another use case, APRS, and the software that I've included is Direwolf, which is kind of like the best well-known program for doing AX25 packet modem TNC and APRS encoding and decoding. There's also an APRS GUI client / Digipeater / iGate called Zaster. And then there's a Java program which is called Yet Another APRS Client, or YAC. And then I think the APRS message app for JS8 call was, I want to say that I think that might have been done by KM4ACK. He's a pretty well-known YouTuber that does a lot of stuff with the Raspberry Pi. Finally, we have some other programs, APRS Digi, APRX, and Sound Modem that support APRS. And then if you're doing CW or Morse code, don't feel left out. We have all sorts of programs for this. We got Aldo, which is a training program, or we have CW, which can sound characters as Morse code on the sound card, or basically the audio jack out on the Raspberry Pi. You've got some tutor programs. You can convert ebooks to Morse MP3 sound files. So you can take the ebook, convert to a MP3 with Morse code in it, and then I guess play that back somewhere else. I'm not very familiar with these programs because I started to learn CW about 20 years ago. I learned, and I wasn't learning with any particular strategy in mind. I was just following some tapes. Although I've learned there's a couple of different there's a couple of different thoughts on how to train for learning CW since then. So when I restart that, I'll try one of those two methods. So anyway, all sorts of support for CW. And then especially in the Gwinnett area, there's a big support for DStar. So what's included is a DRATS, which is a text and file communication tool for DStar. And I'm actually pulling from the currently maintained one by an Italian ham, Maurizio. What I've included is a update ability. So remember I mentioned that we're able to update FLDigi and WSJTX. Well, I've included an update script that will also update DRAT from what the current version is on Maurizio's GitHub page. And then also for DStar, there's a BlueDV, which is a voice client for DStar, DMR, and Yaesu System Fusion. Although the BlueDV client for Linux is about 3 years behind the Windows version, and it is not as well supported, doesn't work as well, but it's what we got to work with, so I've included with HamPi. But don't expect any support from the author. He doesn't provide it. There is a Facebook group where there's community support, so you can get help from other people, but I'm sure what they can do is pretty limited for the Linux version of BlueDV. The Windows version of BlueDV actually works pretty well once you understand its quirks. But that's beyond HamPi. So we also have support for software-defined radio on HamPi. One of my favorite programs is Cubic SDR. And then there's also GQRX, which are kind of the two big ones, programs that are available for Windows and Linux and Mac. But I also got some high-end stuff here like SDR Angel, which folks are actually surprised even runs on the Raspberry Pi. SDR Angel will not run in a usable manner on a Raspberry Pi 3, but it will run on a Raspberry Pi 4, although it's very slow. And then I've got a bunch of modules for supporting different things for audio devices and hack RFs and net SDRs and RTL SDRs, a little $25 USB dongles and SDR play devices and even more. I'm including support for all the SOAPy modules that are available on the internet. So I added the rest of them to HamPi 1.1.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So with the SDR, you use a little external device that the antenna connects to, and then this connects to your radio, and you've got, your computer turns into a radio?
So I've got both of the RTL SDR dongle, which is they used to be TV receivers, but it plugs into the USB port. It's got the radio inside of it, and then it connects to an antenna. The same deal for my Lime. I have a Lime SDR. Again, it plugs into the USB and it plugs into an antenna, and it's got actually has a transceiver in it, so it's not just receive it. It will transmit, although it transmits in the milliwatt range in terms of power. And then I have a SDR play, which plugs in on USB, and it receives over either a random wire or whatever length antenna you want to throw at it. And that's actually one of my favorites. The SDR player works very well for me. So it's got all the it's got all the necessary radio components internal, but then it does the conversions internal and software on the computer on the Raspberry Pi. So that's the same deal for whether you're dealing with an RTL SDR or a Lime SDR or a SDR play device. They're all doing the conversions in software.
So when you look at
the computer becomes part of the radio.
Right. So the display on the display on the computer actually has the radio buttons and knobs on there. It looks like a radio, or
yeah, I can show that to you when I get to the demo part.
Thanks.
Finally, people that do satellite communication, which is unfortunately not me yet. I want to get into it, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. We have satellite prediction software called gPredict, and that's a GUI application. There's another GUI application called Predict-GSAT, and then GNSS SDR I'm not very familiar with, but what we do have is WX2IMG, which is it's imaging software if you have a special type of antenna to listen to the NOAA weather satellites. You can either have one of those, I think it's a helical type antenna, or I've actually seen them with a antenna set at about 100, like a dipole set, but turned at 120 degrees, set for I think it was a one. Yeah, I forgot the frequency range for that. So anyway, we have support for EM-COM users or WinLink users. There's Pat WinLink, which I have not been able to get to work with my ICOM 7300 yet. It seems to want to transmit or receive, but it actually never keys it up. So Pat WinLink has RDOP support and RDOP GUI. And retrieving RDOP sources. There's also AX25 support for Pat WinLink, and finally a pack utility for Linux. Okay, so if you want to model your own antennas, we've got software for you. The most familiar stuff are the NEC2C or the XNEC view. which are the pretty well known. They have pretty well known Windows versions of those programs. And then there's HF propagation prediction, VOA CAP. A couple of ham training testing softwares, FCC exam, ham exam. I think they're kind of out of date, but they're included because that's what exists in the software distribution. And then finally, we have a bunch of miscellaneous applications. If you want to program your HT, we have Chirp. I heard you all talking about Echolink, so we have Qtel and a couple of other programs. Qtel's an Echolink client, but then there's also some Echolink server software called SVX Link. If you're doing anything with slow scan TV, which I think should just be called fax, we have QSS TV. There's a free digital voice encoder and decoder, which is called a vocoder. It's free DV. I sat in on a talk on that during one of the HamFests, and it sounds really exciting. There's not a lot of free DV users out there. They're kind of hard to find. There's Raspberry Pi, which is Whisper software specific for the Raspberry Pi. I've got something called Dump 1090, which the 1090 is for 1.09 gigahertz or 1090 megahertz. So there's ADSB flight tracking software. And then I've got some DX cluster client and server software on the HamPi. So that's it. That's the main discussion about HamPi. I want to mention that HamPi, I decided to support a couple of charities. There are about 24 million families in the U.S. Where one parent has been totally erased out of their child's lives. So in the case of divorce custody situations, so basically I don't take any money, but I do encourage people to donate to the Father's Rights Movement or Americans for Equal Shared Parenting. There's a document on the GUI desktop of HamPi that shows you how to give back to these charities. If you know, because I spent 6 months putting together HamPi and I've been supporting it ever since. I don't ask for any money, but if you do want to give back to my effort, I would appreciate if you gave to one of these two charities, because I support 50-50 shared parenting. And I'm actually working on House Bill 96 in Georgia right now for support of a rebuttable presumption of 50-50 shared parenting. So yeah, thank you for letting me give my little spiel here about that. So any questions before I jump into the demo? All right, let me go ahead and you guys are pretty easy. Let me go ahead and open up a window to my Raspberry Pi. All right, so I got a window open. Let me go ahead and share. Okay, can you all see HamPi by W3DJS up on your screen?
Yes.
Cool. I was actually having a problem with FLRig earlier. Let me go ahead and force this closed. So I was apparently switching frequencies too quickly. So HamPi is a GUI desktop right here, blue background. There's a software license on the desktop. The document I was talking about, the give back. If you're working HamPi with a draws hat, it tells you how to activate the draws hat with HamPi. And then finally, the README that comes with HamPi they're all on the desktop. In the case of being able to activate the programs, about 2/3 of the programs are GUI applications, but 1/3 of them are not GUI and they're not available in the menu. But the 2/3 that are available are on the main menu underneath Ham Radio. And as I mentioned before, we have some antenna analyzer apps. And if you remember from the slide, I had more than 2 apps on there, but there's only 2 GUI applications for antenna analyzers. The other ones are run off the terminal. So I've got some EPRS programs. Remember I mentioned Direwolf and Zaster and Yak. These are all on here. Antenna calculators. I got a GTK Smith chart calculator, which wasn't even mentioned. I've got DRATs. In fact, let me go ahead and launch DRATs here. let's see if I've saved the preferences for, okay, so it doesn't have the preferences for DRATs. So let's just go ahead and plug in right now a call sign, W3DJS, Dave, and save. And go to chat. And already we have a station that's on the main one. There's multiple RAT collectors or servers that support DRATs, but I'm already seeing one station on DRATs here, N0 DSS. And okay, it's showing 8 stations, 9 stations. So I've just basically said, hey, who's on here? And we're getting about 13 stations on one of the main RAT collectors. And you can actually communicate to these people using the DRATs program. You can type in text messages here. You can send files to them, all sorts of stuff with DRATs. And I know that the Georgia Aries and Gwinnett Aries both use DRATs for emergency communication. So I'm not going to quit out of DRATs. I want to show you how powerful the Raspberry Pi is. I'm just going to go ahead and put this in the background. So DRATs is still running off the menu here. And
hey, Dave, would you tell us how the signal gets from you to them? Is it going through the air at any point, all through the internet, a mixture of both?
It would be a mixture of both. In DRATs, what I'm doing right now, this is running over the internet. So I'm selecting preferences here. When you go to the radio selection here, and you can click add for a radio. Radios are considered either a serial connection to a radio or a TNC or a dongle. But in my particular case, my quote unquote radio is a network connection to ref.drats.com. But you can't actually hook up a real radio to DRATs. I've never done that. I do have an ICOM ID 52, but I've never actually done that with the radio. So, but yeah, DRATs can run over actual radio hardware or it can run over the internet. And I'm just choosing to run it over the internet. Any other questions about DRATs? All right, I'm just going to throw that into the background and you see it's running there. Then I'm going to bring back up the ham radio menu. So we showed DRATs. And remember, I mentioned there was an update DRAT script. This will actually update to the latest version of DRAT. So you don't have to, if there's a bug fix that's released, you can pick it up immediately. I said there's the FL Digi suite of software, and we got about a dozen apps right here for FL Digi. I'm going to start FL Rig. And it says it's initializing the 7300 and it's switching frequencies a couple of times. And it just put me on 3.975, which is where I had a net earlier tonight. It was the Georgia single sideband net at 6 o'clock. So is basically FL Rig here is controlling my ICOM 7300. And I've configured WSJTX. So it's under the weak signal, WSJTX. I've configured WSJTX so it controls radio not directly, but actually through FL Rig. So WSJTX takes a little moment to start up. It's a pretty hefty program. It does a lot of stuff. And of course, it says we're at 3.975 in red because that's not a really supported frequency. I'm just going to put this on 40 meters here, 7.074. And wait for this to decode a message. When this blue bar gets to about 12 or 13, it should do a first pass decode, and then when it hits 15, it should do a second pass decode. So okay, so we missed one. Let's give it another moment here to pick up a signal. And of course, yeah, there's my demo glitch. What is going on? File settings. Let's check to see if it's got the right audio. Yeah, it's got the correct audio inputs. Ooh. So yeah, also input, also output. All right, so I guess it's just deciding to be a little bit tough for me tonight. I'll go ahead and push WS. Yeah, it's not picking up anything in the waterfall. So I am not sure why that's happening, and I'm just going to go ahead and push WSJTX to the background here. Or actually, I'm going to quit out of it and try to see if I can run FL Digi. So let's go ahead and launch FL Digi. So FLDigi, for those of you who aren't familiar with FLDigi, FLDigi stands for Fast Light Digital Communications. It supports communicating like using PSK31. I think whatever I did, I must have done it to both FLDigi and WSGTX because again, there's nothing showing up in the waterfall. And since we're right on the FT8 frequency, this should be very busy right now on the waterfall. So I apparently did something to the radio or to the HamPi right before the demo. So I apologize about that. Just it's a hazard. It's a hazard of getting things ready right the same day of the demo. So, all right. So let me go ahead and quit out of this. And remember what I mentioned, we have also support for programming HTs. So we have Chirp. And so Chirp is a program that I don't have an HT hooked up to this right here, but I do have the ability to go ahead and create a new settings file for this, and then I can go ahead and query from a data source and pull in local repeaters and the like. So if it decides to go and pop up the menu here, let's go to repeater book. And let me type, what's a downtown Atlanta zip code? Anybody?
How about 30303?
30303, and let's do a distance of 25 miles. And let's just say 2 meters here. I'm gonna click OK and give it a chance to load up. And there we go with the repeater book. Okay, so it loaded up a bunch of different repeaters here. There we go, W3DJS, and then you got Alfred W4BOC there. So then you can basically load these repeaters up onto your HT using Chirp. So it's a pretty good program for doing that. As long as the data is still good in repeater book, then people should be able to go into your repeater pretty easily. So, which I noticed a lot of the local repeaters are heavily underused, which is kind of sad. I wish they were used more.
You know, does that work with Baofeng?
Yes, it does. In fact, that's one of the best radios it works with is Baofeng. Let me go to radio, let me go to download from radio. And this allows you to select the vendor. So these are like Baofeng's right here, but it has support for ICOM. It has support for Kenwood. I see Anytone. Anytone does a lot of advertising. Radiodity, Redivis, and TYT are some apparently big sellers. Was it Wushun? And so it supports all these different radio vendors.
If you're TYT, I wonder if it handles the DMR config. That's pretty cool.
Well, let's see if we can do a query for that. So query data source, repeater book. Does it have, okay, so I guess if you do DMR, okay, so it doesn't have a separate selection for a DMR. It has so if your DMR is on 2 meters or 70 centimeters, I guess it just loads that in with the regular repeater list. I've never done programming for DMR before, but notice this column here, mode. We have a bunch of FMs, and then we have I guess DV's digital voice. This one here says P25. So I'm not familiar with that radio.
The digital voice, that's probably the ARC-D star repeater.
Yeah, it could be. It doesn't seem to be saying, and I'm not familiar with that offhand. I'd have to look it up on the web. Oh, speaking of the web, so I've included a couple of goodies with the built-in Chromium browser. So let me bring up the browser. The browser I built on bookmarks. When you actually start up HamPi, the Chromium browser in HamPi, You have some built-in bookmarks. So we have a bookmark to the HamPi on GitHub. And this, if you run into a problem with HamPi, I mean, and you know it's an actual problem with HamPi and not a problem on your end, you can create an issue on it and basically report it to me, and I'll take care of it as I have spare time. So and of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's a wiki for HamPi, and it's very, very detailed. We have all these different pages that talk about different components of HamPi. So so we've got that, links to ARRL, we got links to QRZ, et cetera, et cetera. So we got a bunch of links to start people out on. Of course, you can add your own links to the list. So I'll background that. Notice I'm running a 8 GB Raspberry Pi here. I'm running FLReg. I'm running a web browser with multiple windows open. I'm running Chirp. I'm also running DRATS, which DRATS is getting messages here. Apparently NS2B is Bob in Penfield, New York, and he wants everybody to know that. So he set up a broadcast message that sends periodically. Also, as terms of ham radio software on here, I did mention there's Blue DV, but I don't have the right hardware to make that work on the Raspberry Pi. We got a nice piece of software here called HamClock, and somebody was actually asking me earlier today about the HamClock, because I'm using one particular size here on the screen, and HamClock it doesn't support a variable screen size. It compiles to 3 different sizes, so I just chose the smallest one for HamPi. Although somebody asked me to support a larger size, so I might go ahead and add that for HamPi 1.3. I haven't decided yet. This takes us good old time to initialize here. But once it's ready all the way, it's going to go ahead and display all its graphics here. So here we're showing that, yep, we're inside we're outside where the sun's shining, and so it's basically a ham clock. You can configure your call sign on here, and you can configure some different stuff. I just brought it up the plain Jane way that it runs. So there's your ham clock software. So is there any particular piece of software anybody wants to take a look at? Because I don't want to bore you all. I mean, I can keep going and showing different stuff here. I just don't want to. I don't want to. I gave you all a lot of information. I don't want to bore you all.
Oh, not at all. This is amazing.
So this, like I said, there's 90 or so applications in HamPi, and it just keeps getting bigger and better with every release. Oh, the fun thing I haven't shown yet, and let me see if I can get it to work. This was what I was messing with right before the meeting. So I'm going to open up a terminal window here, and I'm going to go ahead and increase the size so you all can see it better. I think it's Control. Okay, Control Shift Plus. All right, so hopefully you all can see that a little bit better. There's a ham radio directory on there, and then there's Universal Ham Radio Remote Control. So anybody who's wanted to remote control your station, we've got 2 different ways to remote control. First, I'm showing you the Raspberry Pi through my laptop computer. So I'm not sharing the screen of the Pi. I'm sharing the screen of my laptop, which is getting a remote screen from the Pi. So you can control FLDigi and WSJTX just like this over the internet. But then there's another thing right here, and okay, I want line 137. There is a universal ham radio. Am I already running this? Oh, yeah, apparently I'm already running this. So let me go ahead and share a different screen here, because I'm going to show you the. This is remote station operation for voice. And I made sure to add this to HamPi 1.2. So let's see if I can get this to start up properly first.
Hey, Dave, while you're doing that, why don't you tell us what your actual day job is, your vocation that got you off into this avocation maybe, because this is an incredible amount of detailed work of hours and hours and hours. So we'd love to hear your backstory.
Yeah. So when I was, I'm not going to give you my whole life story, but I'll give you age 9. Age 9, my mom was working at a men's clothing store at the mall, kind of like a men's warehouse. And this was back in the 80s, and I was left to just kind of wander on my own devices in the mall during the day. Much different than today's, interactions with the mall before COVID. But I wandered across a Texas Instruments TI-994A at the local Sears or JCPenney. And I sat down with it and started typing stuff. It was displaying on a screen. It was turned on. So I started typing random stuff on the keyboard and kept getting back syntax errors. And I'm like, okay, apparently it doesn't like what I'm saying. But then being a curious 9-year-old, I opened up the drawer on the desk underneath the computer, and there was a single sheet of paper with a program written on it. So I went ahead and typed the program into the computer, ran it, and it said syntax error on line 70. So I told the program to list, and then I took a look at line 70 as I typed it, and I took a look at line 70 as I wrote it on the sheet of paper, and I realized I had made a mistake. So I retyped line 70 and then hit run, and then all of a sudden on the screen I had a little left to right asterisks and a little sine wave. And at that point, I knew I was hooked on computers, and I knew that computers were the thing for me at age 9, and it's turned into it was initially kind of a fun hobby thing, but it's turned into a career, and it's provided for my family. So I've programmed in C and C++. I've been a software engineer. I've been a software architect. I've designed software systems. Lately, I've been doing DevOps type work. And so I've been putting together software configuration in Ansible. And that's actually, what I'm doing at my day job is very literally some of the same stuff. What I'm doing for HamPi is literally some of the same stuff I'm doing for my day job. So, and writing Ansible scripts is way easier than writing software code. Okay, so I'm going to have to restart this little program here. Let's go ahead and kill this off.
Hey, Dave, while you're doing that, a question for you. You've mentioned a couple of times that this gets updated in this particular version of HamPi, or the other gets updated in another version. Is it possible to go and self-update these various programs as well as the base OS?
Yeah, in fact, let me reshare the screen and show it to you. Okay, so in the Pi users home directory, bin directory, there's a couple of programs here. Update FL Digi Suite. You can literally just run update FL Digi Suite. And when you run that, it's going to look at the installed version of the FL Digi Suite programs, and then look at what's available on the web. And if what's available on the web is newer than what's available locally, it will download it and build it, and then install it. In this particular case, I already ran it earlier today. So it's going to look at FLReg. It says installed FLReg version is current, installed FLA version is current, installed version of FL message is current. So it's not updating anything because there isn't anything to update. If you want, I could go and delete a program here just simply so I could re-download and build if you want to see that.
No need to do that. Just normal background sudo apt update kind of things that still works.
You could do that too. And remember I said you can update FL Digi, you can update WSJTX, and you can also update DRATs. Technically, one could use the Ansible playbooks I wrote to create HamPi to update HamPi, but I haven't haven't actually bothered to set up the facility to do that. And I'm a little afraid to, because I think that would create a support headache for me. So if you're smart enough to use Ansible, you can get at it, but I'm not going to, I think it would be a bad idea for me because I have a limited number of hours in my day. I already field emails from people that both email me directly and then send messages through the HamPi support forum. Oh, I totally forgot to mention. So HamPi, since I built it with Ansible, it doesn't care if this is a Linux-based Raspberry Pi. Ansible supports any Linux machine. So I went ahead and made some changes to support a 64-bit Intel Linux version, and I named that HamPC. So I've actually built HamPi that runs on your PC desktop or laptop, and that's called HamPC. So that's also available. That's also available on SourceForge. And it's literally HamPi, but just ported to the PC.
Ported to the PC, Linux.
Yes, yeah, it's running Ubuntu, which is a lightweight Ubuntu. So it will run great on 10-year-old PCs.
That's pretty neat.
So, yeah, in fact, let me bring up the web browser again here. So remember I said it was SourceForge.net. Let me go ahead and bring up SourceForge here, and you don't have to remember anything other than it's just HamPC. So once you get here, the SourceForge.net, just type in HamPC, and it shows up as the very first link on screen here. So I'm going to click on that, and it will go to SourceForge.net/projects/HamPC eventually here. Apparently, SourceForge is it's waiting on some other. It's downloading a bunch of other crap with the web page, but yeah, you can download HamPC, and its current status is beta. I'm still working on the delivery method for it, but if you want to try the bleeding edge, HamPC is right there available for anybody to download. Remember what I said? I had some stuff that went along with the image file. Well, HamPC is no different. I have a December release, which is the very first release of HamPC, and on here, I've got the ISO image, which is, well, it's actually not ISO, it's actually just an image file, which is 3.1 gigabytes. But then I have a checksum of the files, so you can make sure that if you run a SHA-256 sum of the image download, it should match the number that's in this file right here. I have directions on how to flash the image. I've got changelog information. I've got the HamPC password, which I think is HamPC. A README in Word format, the give back document. Remember I mentioned about the Fathers' Rights Movement and Americans for Equal Share Parenting, how to upgrade from a prior version, how to contribute, and then finally the HamPC license. So, got a whole bunch of different things to support this. HamPC has enjoyed a certain bit of maturity in its beta because it's borrowed heavily from HamPi, and the same Ansible scripts that build HamPi will build HamPC. So yeah, so you guys are actually getting a two for tonight. You're not just getting a Raspberry Pi software image, you're also getting a PC software image. Now there are some differences between HamPi and HamPC. Specifically, there's 3 programs under HamPi which are Raspberry Pi specific programs. So those have been excluded from HamPC. And likewise, I'm eventually going to have some programs that will run specifically on HamPC but not HamPi, but I haven't gotten there yet. So go ahead.
So you're running, you're running a lot of software here. There are a lot of windows, and I just wanted to. So everything that you're showing is running on this $60 little circuit board on your desk, right?
Yeah, it's running on my $75 Raspberry Pi 4B.
And so yeah, so it looks like, yeah, so you got Windows, you got all these programs, right? And you don't need much of a program, much of a computer to do it. So it's portable.
No,
battery.
This is a very low cost, lightweight, small form factor computer. It really is the perfect ham shack computer. Now let me think a second here. Somebody was you always have to worry a little bit about RF in the ham shack. Oh, so one of the three programs that were Raspberry Pi specific, you can actually turn the Raspberry Pi GPIO pins into an FM transmitter, and you could probably turn it into AM transmitter too. The mode is just a matter of software, but you can actually transmit in the milliwatt range off the Raspberry Pi into your shack. That's called RPI TX, and it's a nice little application specific to the Raspberry Pi. So yeah, you can actually use the Pi to transmit radio in the shack.
So you take the antenna and just hook it up to two pins on the Pi?
Yep.
Oh.
I think it's just one pin, but yeah. So I think you just connect a single conductor wire just to one pin, and that's it.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't think it's like a dipole.
Bob, I'm surprised you haven't asked to see the Smith chart program.
Nah. Yeah, that's I've got my I've learned how much everybody else is curious knows about the Smith, wants to know about the Smith chart, so that's why I didn't ask. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of familiarity with this program. Like I'm a software collector, but running the software is a totally different problem. Like I know how to get the software in the collection, but to run it is a totally different thing. Oh yeah, the satellite stuff. Let's load up gpredict. I remember I'm still running all these other programs, so plenty of memory, plenty of horsepower in this Raspberry Pi. So we've got AO73. I'm guessing that's a CubeSat that's coming over. That's over the Western United States, and it says acquisition of signal in 115 minutes. So it will be over Atlanta in 2 hours.
So we know which way it's moving.
Yeah, it looks like it's moving northwest. So it just updated once. So and of course with this program you can download updated telemetry data from the internet. So satellites updated 591, new satellites 449. We have an amazing amount of space junk. An amazing amount. Oh, and that satellite just disappeared. So I'm guessing that was off the mark.
So the space station on there?
Yeah.
It does have the ISS on here. And actually the ISS is right here, right over top of South America, and it's heading southeast. So acquisition of signal in 521 minutes. So don't hold your breath waiting for the ISS. So was it about 10 hours? So something like that.
I have to say, you have put together an amazing package here. There's enough here to keep a ham busy for many a winter night or even a COVID isolation. This is,
I'm glad to hear that. I originally created this just for myself, and it was just called, I didn't even have a name for it. I just created it for myself, and it was hand built. And then I got to thinking about it. It's like, well, maybe some other hams would enjoy it. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll get like 5 or 10 downloads from people from GARS. So I made it available to GARS, and they loved it. And that encouraged me to release it more widely, which I did. And then all of a sudden, thousands and thousands of downloads of it. And then I realized I had a winner on my hands. I went at that point, and I converted this from a homemade image to an Ansible created image. So this is now created using automated software techniques. I start the Ansible playbooks running, and they just build the software on the Raspberry Pi, and it takes about 7 hours to run on a Pi 4 using all 4 cores. So I run the Pi hot for about 7 hours. And then after that's done creating the image, then I spent about 2 hours compressing it and repackaging it for distribution on the web. So it literally takes an hour to compress this from 15 gigabytes down to 3.5.
It's a lot of processing.
Yeah, well, that's on my Lenovo W550S laptop. I have a faster work laptop. I'm not sure I should be wearing a work laptop for my hobby. So, but I created all my older home laptop.
So, because one thing that you've done for us is not just package the program, say here, you don't have to get them yourself, here it is. I certainly, how many programs that you have on there did I ever hear of?
Yeah, about 90.
Yeah, and I maybe know 7. So I would not have downloaded them. I wouldn't have known to download them. So fortunately, they're all in your distribution here. So we get to play with the ones we want. You're not going to play with all of them, but yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that's.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes, somebody was talking about
mind-blowing.
Somebody was talking about cubic SDR earlier. I don't have a radio plugged into this at the moment. If you give me a second, I could probably find one. Do y'all have time for me to plug in one, or are you guys good?
Go for it.
Okay,
Don't mind. Yeah.
Tilt my laptop, so I'm going to close the shutter so that you all don't get a shot of my crotch. So let me find the cable here and plug it into the Pi, because I've got an SDR Play with a very simple FM receiver antenna on it. And
Dave, can I ask a question while you're doing that?
go ahead.
So you're using the Raspberry Pi, but you're using it, I guess the term is headless, and you're connecting to it remotely with another computer. Doesn't that negate the power savings of the Pi, since you're using another laptop? Or I don't understand that aspect of this. Could you just use the Pi directly with keyboard and mouse and not have that link?
Just because I'm using it one way doesn't mean you can't use it another way. I get emails all the time from people saying that they're using it in the field, and they're using it with like a little 7-inch LCD display or some such off of that. So it's a computer. It's general purpose, and you can configure it any way you want.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So this is not recognizing that. Let me try one more SDR with it. Apparently it doesn't like my new SDR Play device. Let me try my old one. Yeah, you know you're a radio person when you collect many different kinds of radios. All right.
It's just good to know that problems like this happen to other people.
Yeah. It's refreshing, and okay, apparently it's got issues. Let me restart Cubic SDR again. Let me restart Cubic SDR, and there we go. It's seeing the SDR Play. Go ahead and click start here. And I have no clue what frequency it's going to go get. Okay. Is that? Do I need, let me go ahead and see about plugging in an antenna on this one. Give me a second. And then I'll find out. Then hopefully we'll get something on the water. Hopefully we'll get something on the waterfall. I've got no sound output on the Pi, so we're not going to hear anything.
But that's nice. You can set this thing up and you can see what's in the air, and then you can tune to it with your regular radio.
Absolutely, yeah, it works as a band adapter. All right. So we're at 199. I don't want 199. I want like 99.7. This should be in the FM band. All
Yeah.
right. Apparently I'm doing something wrong. Do I need to start it?
Your bandwidth is set to 0. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, I have a bunch of bookmarks on the other computer. So good catch on the bandwidth. I'm trying to see if I can expand the bandwidth.
Yeah, you need to select which device you're using.
Oh, now it seems to be locked up. All right, let's try this one more time. Or you know what? I like I said, I have more than one SDR program. Let's go to GQRX. It's a little, for me, it's a little clunkier, but some people like GQRX much better because it actually has audio. It has an audio out over a network port capability, so you can feed it the radio's output somewhere else, like for APRS decoding, for example. So let me quit some of these other programs just to give it a little bit more speed.
You don't want to turn the Raspberry Pi into a space heater.
They can't get warm, and I run. There we go. So let's see if the device shows. It is not showing the SDR play on here, and I'm not sure how to get it to show up under GQRX. Let me cancel out of this. Let me try one more time here. I don't want to make you all go crazy while I play here with software problems. What would be easier would be for me just to get my bookmarks file from the other computer and put it on here, and I'd just be able to tune in to the local FM radio stations or the repeaters or whatnot.
Judy.
Arnold, mute.
I can select ranges off this. All right. All right. What other questions do you all have?
Well, I've got a comment, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Just for the listeners, you know, there've been a lot of acronyms and modes mentioned today that most people don't know, and if you're a lot of people don't know. And if you're a new ham, you know, you think you learned a lot for the test, and then you go here and you see things like DRATs and all these radio things that you never heard of. And what we're going to try and do in the ARC and the you know, the other clubs do is get something together where we have a presentation on what all these different things are, what digital is, and the types of digital, and even the SDRs, and just how to, just what's out there, because there's so much out there that is not on the test, and there's so much fun stuff out there that's not on the test, and we're going to need to try and catch everybody up on that. It changes pretty quickly.
Yeah, I want to apologize if I spoke if I said stuff that people aren't familiar with. I'm used to this stuff, and I may not necessarily be the best teacher, but I think what people should just get out of this is that HamPi's is a big honking toolbox of software that you can run, and if you don't get anything else, get that out of it. So.
Yeah, what's that line from War Games? And she says, "What's this mean?" He says, "I don't know, but it's great."
All right, Cubic SDR is starting again. I have an idea on how to fix this. If it will give me a range to expand. There's
there.
I'm trying to click on view ranges, and it's not taking them. It's not taking the mouse click. Because view ranges will let me tune into like the 2 meter ham band, for example. and it's not giving me the stupid thing. So I think I busted something. But there was one other thing I wanted to show you guys, and that was the remote control. That was the remote control for the remote station control, where you could control a voice station remotely. So literally, you could have your Raspberry Pi sitting in your shack hooked up to your radio, and your radio is controlled using HamLib, and it's got a software sound card, like the ICOM 7300 over the USB, and then you connect to your station using a web browser on a tablet or phone or another laptop in a completely different part of the house, or literally in another state, and you could talk that way. Although there's going to be latency considerations when you talk, when you hear stuff and when stuff's actually said. The internet will introduce a little bit of latency, but it should be usable.
So you can put a radio and an antenna up in a mountaintop somewhere, and then you can just hit it. If there's internet there, you can hit it from home.
Absolutely. All right. I just want to make sure UHRR is dead, and it looks to be dead now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and run UHRR again here. I mean, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch screens now to hopefully one that's going to show this. Oops. All right, so I want, which screen do I want? This one right here. All right. So I have to wait for it to start up in order to refresh the screen. Okay, it says HTTP server started. So let's go ahead and reload this. And it's either going to display, or it's going to create some sort of, it's going to give us some sort of error. So there we go. So when I tried to actually use this before, something went awry and I didn't troubleshoot it. But basically, your waterfall is right here in this little, oh, okay, please enter your call sign. So Whiskey 3 Delta Juliet Sierra, okay. And I have told it I'm using an ICOM 7300 earlier. So let's see if we can get this to work. I don't know if the demo gods are going to be nice to me, but let's find out. Ooh, that's a good sign.
So you powered it up.
It says waiting for connection. So it's new connection on audio receive handler socket, new connection on audio transmission handler socket. So it's doing stuff on the side. I'm not sure why it says slow. And of course we need let me see, lower sideband, and okay, I don't think it's changed. It hasn't changed.
You got something there.
Okay, we're getting something. It's not really what I wanted, but okay, why did it lose the frequency?
That's okay. That's
okay. Basically,
try for home.
When this does work, and this is okay, yeah, the server side just crashed and it restarted. So I think we're just running into a little glitch here. But basically it shows the waterfall waveform over here, and you could set your modes: lower sideband, upper sideband, AM, FM, CW. Set your frequencies in megahertz, kilohertz, and hertz over here. We have our AF gain here, our receive volume, mic gain, transmit volume. This is your bandwidth filter right here. So how wide you want this set. and then I apparently made the window too small. And I don't know whether or not this is going to resize and show you.
We're gonna have a session, I'm sure, down the road on remote operations, because that's,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are curious about that. One more point I want to make, and I guess we probably need to wrap it up, is yeah, you've spoken at GARS. GARS has workshops, which is a hands-on, they have meetings, and then they have workshops, where you're hands-on, you're building something or you're programming something, and I was at the one that you were at, or one of the ones that you were at, and you're going around person to person, helping everybody get their, they brought in Raspberry Pis and you got everybody going.
Yeah.
So if for whoever's listening, if you don't think if you want to try this and you need help, or you can, one of the things you can do is when GARS has their next workshop for you that you're running, Dave, yeah, go to that and he'll help you all over the place. It was pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, not everybody knows everything. I've got my little silo where I know stuff, and I'm happy to share with that. But like when you talk about like antenna trimming and getting the SDR just right, I am not an expert with that. So computers, I know. getting SWR in tune, that's something I don't have a lot of experience with, for example.
Yeah, a lot of
satellites,
there's the wide world of radio, and
I'll tell you, by the way, I am looking for this. If maybe you guys know, I'm trying to find like a 1930s or 1940s AM receiver, preferably one of the ones that are the cathedral style. But anything with a restorable wood case, like if it's water damaged, I'm not interested in it. But even if the finish is off, but the wood's still good and I can refinish it, I'm looking for an AM radio from the 30s or 40s.
They're around eBay.
Yeah, there's eBay. I'd rather find one at a HamFest, and of course those are.
Yeah.
Actually, there is a HamFest happening this month. Dalton's having their HamFest, and they do have an outdoors swap fest, so you don't have to worry about getting exposed to people indoors. You would probably still mask up outdoors, but I would think it would be a bit safer than going inside the buildings.
That's pretty cool.
There's also the SARS group. SARS, they're amateur rate, not ham radios, but antique radio, Southeastern Antique Radio Society.
SARS, okay.
Oh, yeah, they were
local.
at HamFest one year.
I could probably Google them. And they have swap fests and stuff, and just generally sell radios to each other and old radio. They're into restoration of antique radios.
There you go.
I found them. They're Southeastern Antique Radio Society, sarsradio.com.
That's it.
Hey, Dave, can I take advantage of you here for a second?
Sure.
So I have a couple of Pi holes here, and for those of y'all that don't know, a Pi hole is something that helps keep all the garbage off of my computers here at my home. And when I go to update it, I just simply run a script, Pi hole -up, and boom, it does it, and it's done. I've noticed that you have a few programs or a few apps on your distribution that can also self-update. Here at home, I also have 2 of these MMDVM hotspots. And now when I log into them on a computer, it's telling me at the top, alert, you have old software, you got to update it. And in order to update it, I can't run an update script. I've got to reflash the whole card and just start all over and hopefully restore my latest backup. I haven't done it yet. Why is it that some programs can update so easily with an app, with a script, and others don't?
It depends on how complex the system is and how long it would take to write the updater. Updating individual components like FLDigi and WSGTX are relatively simple. When you're updating an entire system, an entire operating system, that gets to be a bit more complex. It's an nlog x function. In other words, it gets exponentially more difficult the more files you have to update.
Okay, thank you. I really just didn't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, updating one thing is fine, but do you know the story of the farmer who wanted to be paid by the king by having a single grain of rice or flour or whatnot on the first square of a checkerboard and doubling it ever since then? Well, at the last square of the checkerboard, you're 2 to the 64th. That's a lot of grains of rice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just becomes an exponentially more difficult problem the bigger the system gets.
A lot of memory too. Anyway, we're gonna go. Dave, I want to thank you very much for presenting to us, and make one more comment that you do the distribution, you put everything together, and you've got software to do updates. But if one of the programs on there is not working, that's not you. That's
yeah, I get hit by questions all the time. Like somebody was complaining about WSGTX was doing a fatal error, and it was before I was even running that version of WSGTX. And it turns out it's a brand new defect in WSGTX. That's I would say it's a design defect that's aggravated by the Raspberry Pi, and there's a workaround for it. But I was trying to help the guy out and not even aware that this was a WSJT specific problem. But yeah, I get hit by questions about the programs on the HamPi all the time, and a lot of times I will just direct people to the HamPi wiki or direct them to the software developer's website for more assistance. So
yeah, and thanks for keeping. Yeah, people know you ask questions; they ask you all kinds of things. But again, thank you for presenting to us, and hopefully, we'll keep up with the developments. We will keep up the developments on HamPC and HamPi. And
absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah, you all can go to groups.io/g/ham-pi and subscribe.
Cool.
Yeah, congrats on the popularity of what you've created, Dave.
This was very good, and
I never thought this would get so big. Let me show you. I've got a collection here, and actually, I've got one more thing to show you guys too, because I promised earlier I would show you a different collection. Hopefully, these don't fall apart on me. So I put in HamPi that I like collecting QSL cards. These are my QSL cards from like the last 3 months that I've collected from HamPi. One fellow sent me a QSL card that was printed on a 3D printer. And I thought that was really unique. And then another person, he's a submariner. He sent me a certificate, which I went ahead and had framed. So for doing HamPi. So it getting stuff in the mail from people, and I'm not looking for money, but just getting recognized from people is kind of payment for itself,
Yeah, it's definitely. John, so we will thank Dave here, and I guess you want to take it back, John.
Oh, one more thing to show.
Oh, all right. Yeah, you wanted to show us one more thing.
This is my Raspberry Pi cluster. These are 7 Raspberry Pi 3s with 4 cores. So this is a 28 core parallel processing computer based on the Raspberry Pi.
Each of those boards is a fully complete computer. That, right? And you got 7 of them there.
Yeah, this is something called a Turing Pi, and you can buy it on the web. They're actually on sale right now. So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
There's a name for that, for putting them all together. Anyway, thanks again, and over to John.
All right, thanks a lot for another great program, Dave, and of course Rob, putting it all together. We ran a little long tonight, which is great when we have a great program to to enjoy. So thank you for that again. We'll just finish up real quick with a couple tidbits for business wise. Memberships picked up a little bit. If you haven't had a chance to renew, please do so, because of course that helps us with funding repeater projects and other things that the club's involved in. Couple activity items coming up. KB4KFT Bill Perkins is working on I believe it's going to be a day in the park in March in conjunction with the Quarter Century Wireless Association QSO party that weekend. I think it's the 13th, 14th, 15th. So keep an eye out for more information on that. We'll probably do it at Brook Run Park again there in Dunwoody like we've done in the past. And then, of course, you'll have the Georgia QSO party in April. We'll make plans for that, probably an outdoor event also. And, of course, like Dave said, the Dalton Ham Fest is this month. At the end of the month, I believe it's the 27th. So if you're interested in getting back to a Ham Fest, look that one up and go take a trip to Dalton and enjoy that. And then, of course, we're still working on some details about the Atlanta Ham Fest in June with the park. We'll have more information on that shortly going forward. So just stay tuned. And like I said, if you're not a member of if you haven't joined the ARCIO group, do that, because that's a good way to get some information. And of course, Rob's always looking for good programs. So if you have an interest in something, hit him up. I believe KI4UTUI at atlantaradioclub.org works. Is that correct?
Yeah, that does.
Okay. So if you have an interest in a particular kind of program, hit him up, let him know so that we can look into that and maybe present it at a later date. So, and of course, we're always looking for people hopefully we'll have a newsletter this month. So we're always looking for people to write articles. So if you have an itch to write about something, please do so. You can send whatever you have, and if we have to, we'll help clean it up. So don't be afraid to send us bits and pieces. It'll make our job a little easier putting that newsletter together. So I don't think we had a little repeater thing up in the beginning. Do we have anything else anybody can think of that I didn't touch on?
Just a sidebar. I was looking at the Chattahoochee group posted their meeting notes, and in their meeting notes, it said that they were trying to get in touch with you about the Ham Fest.
Okay. All right.
Joe Grimes was trying to get in touch with you.
Yeah, we've chased each other a few times here recently, so I appreciate you letting me know that. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. Keep on the lookout for next month. Do we have a program yet for next month?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah, soon.
So if you got something in mind, hit Rob up. I'm sure he'll be more than appreciative of help with a little help there. So thanks you once again, and we'll see you next week or next month. I'm sorry.
And thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Thank
Thank you for having me.
Dave. It was great. Thank you very much.